Hello and welcome to Williams Mullen's Benefits Companion, a podcast that helps employers navigate the complex legal challenges of managing their employee benefit plans. I'm your host, Brydon DeWitt, and today I'm joined once again by Beryl Ball, Senior Vice President and Financial Advisor with CAPTRUST. The last time Beryl joined us, we reviewed best practices for retirement plan committees, and I asked Beryl to come back and join us again to discuss investment policy statements for retirement plans. Thank you, Beryl, for agreeing to be back on the Benefits Companion, and just really pleased to have you. I think this is a really good follow-up on the Retirement Plan Committee discussion. These two topics are very related. Retirement plan committees, if they have them, need to rely on their investment policy statements. So can you give us some background on your experience with investment policy statements, what they are, and why they're important?
Be glad to, and thank you again for having me back again, Brydon. I really appreciate it. One of the key parts of a committee and an ERISA-focused organization on their benefit plan is actually an investment policy statement. Interestingly, most of what we talk about involving committees and structures is based on ERISA. And ERISA, interestingly enough, doesn't require an investment policy statement. So you would think, well, why is it important then? But what we found is even though it's not required, everyone has one. And the first thing that an auditor does, whether it's Department of Labor or a local auditor, is say, and where's your investment policy statement? Because that's really the guidance that people use. So at CAPTRUST, we've probably spent more than 30 years evolving how we feel about investment policy statements, what should be in them, why they're important, what should people think about, and most importantly, how they should be used.
And it's kind of one of the unwritten rules of ERISA, except to the extent that the Department of Labor it's the department's view that prudence, the duty of prudence, the fiduciary duty under ERISA, really kind of requires you to have an investment policy statement, to have decided from the outset the objectives and the risk and the types of investments that are in the best interest of plan participants and beneficiaries. Not the specific investments, but what guidelines are going to inform the committee on the decisions they make with respect to the investment options they offer to participants under a plan.
One of the things we've learned is that the term you just used, guidelines, is really the key. You don't want to be so specific in an investment policy statement that what you're doing becomes rigid. Because one of the worst things you could do, other than not having an investment policy statement, is having one and not following it.
Yeah, and that advice applies across the board with employee benefits. When you have a policy or a plan document or a summary plan description, and it just collects dust on the shelf.
Right.
That's almost worse than not having a policy or an employee handbook.
And what we think of as a guideline is really the key, because what you don't want to do is use words in your policy like must or shall, such that if you decide to do something different at your committee other than what you originally put in the policy, you've created a real problem for yourself. So that's where we see people sometimes faltering, is using words that make the whole program much too rigid. So at that point, what we're trying to do is put into an investment policy some of the key elements. What we generally see first is, what is the purpose of it? So usually the purpose is something that says, we're going to have a plan, the defined contribution plan, defined benefit plan, non-qualified plan, whatever type of plan you're doing, we think should have an investment policy statement. So we're going to put a purpose in. We're going to probably put some goals and objectives. And you're going to talk about in that the role of the committee. Why do you have the committee? What are their roles and responsibilities? And also you're going to put into the program, what's the participant's role? Because in a defined contribution plan, the menu, if you will be selected by the committee, but the actual participant will be the one selecting the investments.
Right.
So we put both of those in the program. We also talk about what kinds of investments are we going to have in the plan. So A normal array of investments is what we would expect to include, where we put in, we're going to have fixed income, we're going to have equities, we're going to have asset allocation, et cetera. The normal range. And again, you don't want to say what you don't want to have in the plan. Often we get categorized by saying, well, we're not going to have this and we're not going to have that, and later you decide you do.
Right, and if you don't go back and formally amend your investment policy statement, even though at the time it may seem to make sense to the committee to go in a different direction, if they're diverging off of what the investment policy statement provides, there's the argument that the committee didn't follow their investment policy statement, if those turn out to be poor choices.
After you kind of define the categories, we usually have something in the investment policy statement that talks about selection. How are you going to go about selecting the investments? And I separate that. One of the things we think is important is to separate selection from monitoring. Two different functions. So you may have selection and talk about things like, how do you want to handle diversity of investments? Do you want to think about participant behavior as well as different kinds of investments? Modern portfolio theory is often used in that case. So do you then want to say, well, if I have different asset classes, what are those asset classes going to be, and how am I going to include them? So when you look at selection, fees is important. And in today's litigious society, fees has become very important. So you want to talk about how you feel about fees. And you want to do something that generally gives you some guidelines. Do you want only fees that are at the lower half of what prospectus ratios show, for example? And then you want to talk about performance. And it's important to say, we think, that performance ought to be looked at over a longer period of time. It's not that a quarter or a year or even 10 years isn't important. We tend to focus in our investment policy on 3 and 5 years. We think that's a long enough period to look at, and we want to select funds that are at least in the top half of performance. And again, we're very general about that, because there might be a time when a fund has fallen below that, but there are really good reasons to keep it because of consistency, because of lack of volatility, et cetera. So again, be careful not to be too rigid.
Right, so the policy could guide the committee on how often you should monitor the general criteria of when a fund should be replaced, or you should consider really watching the fund, but not be so specific that the committee is boxed in that they have to make a decision based on what the investment policy statement says. Really more the overall structure of how decisions are made.
To tag on to that, we even technically don't use in CAPTRUST investment policy words like on watch. We don't use words like must be replaced. And the reason we don't is, again, because we're trying not to box people in. On watch then leads to, well, how long do I keep it on watch? When do I decide it goes off watch? So we've tended to use words like marked for review, so that we're actually reviewing information, not causing a committee to have to make a decision at a particular point in time and then find that they don't, or they make it too soon or later.
And thinking, going back to our prior discussion about retirement committee meetings and the need for these investment policy statements not to collect dust, what is the role of the investment policy statement in a quarterly retirement committee, investment committee meeting?
We always have it in our committee meeting minutes as a key part of the documentation. So we show to folks who would come in perhaps and review the minutes as part of a regular audit that the investment policy statement was looked at, and when we made decisions, we considered what those guidelines and policies said. Clearly, once a year, we think you ought to look at your investment policy statement, see if it's still valid, make sure you're still following it, and committee members, for sure, ought to be familiar with what it is. Oftentimes, committees will adopt someone else's investment policy statement, whether that be from a record keeper, that they use, from a consultant that they use. We would still encourage, however you got the investment policy statement to start with, we would definitely encourage the committees to understand it. The other thing I think people often ask us too, should you have a charter which charters the committee as part of your investment policy statement? We usually tend to have those as two separate documents.
Right.
And describe the roles and responsibility and the delegation of authority in a charter rather than as part of the investment policy statement. Keep the policy more pure.
Okay. Well, Beryl, thank you so much for coming back on the Benefits Companion. Really appreciate your insights on the retirement committees and also investment policy statements. If you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes of the Benefits Companion, you can contact me. You can also visit our employee benefits practice page at williamsmullen.com/employee benefits. There you can find out more about our team as well as past episodes of this podcast and legal alerts. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when our next episode posts. Thanks for listening.